Hey everybody, welcome to the Leek's set review week. This is episode 4. We're going to be reviewing Red today, and we're going to jump right in it. You've heard the disclaimers. I'm not going to repeat them yet another time. If you really are confused by what's happening here or you have questions, go check out the white review, the blue review, the black review. You'll get those disclaimers there. But we're going to jump right on into our first card. We have Alicia, who smiles at death. Kind of a long title, but interesting nonetheless. This is the Mardu Ancestral Con. This is a legendary creature, human warrior, at rare for 2 and a red, and she's a 3/2. She has quite a bit of rules text on her. She has first strike first off. 3/2 first strike for 3. Sold right there. That's fantastic. It's just like Battle Brawler, except Battle Brawler turned on all the time. But there's a whole lot more. She also says, whenever Alicia, who smiles at death, attacks, you may pay Orzhov, so white or black, so white, black, black. If you do, return target creature card with power 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, tapped and attacking. So whenever you attack with her, you can pay 2, as long as you have white or black available in some combination. And if you do, you get a 2-drop or a 1-drop back immediately onto the battlefield and attacking with her. This is interesting. I'll say just straight off the top, 3/2 first strike for 3 is fantastic. Right there, she's an auto-include in every single red deck. Fantastic stats right there. The ability is interesting. Timely Hordemate from Construct here, I thought was going to be incredible. It sounded awesome. Getting back a 2-drop or a 1-drop from your graveyard to the battlefield seemed great. With Timely Hordemate, of course, you could only do it one time, and that was if you had already attacked, because it was a raid trigger. And it didn't really seem to be all that awesome. Sometimes you'd get back a Seeker of the Way, and that was cool. There were a couple of good rare 2-drops, 1-drops that maybe you were happy getting back, but all in all, it just kind of fell flat. I often passed Timely Hordemate near the end. It just wasn't something I was terribly excited about, and I feel like this is going to go down the same route. The fact that it's repeatable is awesome. The fact that if this turn I don't want to return something, I just don't pay the mana cost, and then next turn if I want to return something because now there's something pretty cool in the graveyard, I can pay the mana cost, that makes the ability significantly better than Timely Hordemate, which was just a one-shot and you had to do it when you played that creature, or you just didn't get your Timely Hordemate. You didn't get that first body down anyways. So I do like this ability more than Timely Hordemate, but I'm cautious of it because of how much Timely Hordemate kind of fell down over time. But that being said, she's a 3/2 first strike for 3 and is an auto-include right there. So I'm giving her a B+. If this was a 3/2 first strike, I'd probably give it a C+, B- with the ability. We'll knock it all the way up to a B+. She's not quite a bomb territory. She's not going to end the game right there. She doesn't demand an immediate answer, really, unless your graveyard is visibly stacked with awesome 2-drops and 1-drops. But she is a fantastic card in first pick, for sure, I would say. So I will give her a B+. Next up, we have one that I'm sure is going to be controversial. We have Arc Bond. Arc Bond is an instant for 3 for 2 and a red at rare. And it says choose target creature. Whenever that creature is dealt damage this turn, it deals that much damage to each other creature and each player. So, let's say we're in combat. So we're in combat, and let's say that they're attacking me, and I block their Woolly Loxodon. I block their 6/7 with my 2/2, my morph. I play Arc Bond, and I choose my morph. My morph A doesn't die. It doesn't take the damage from that Woolly Loxodon. B, I get to deal everything that Woolly Loxodon dealt to my morph to every single other creature on the battlefield, as well as to my opponent, as well as to myself. So I'm taking 6, my opponent's taking 6, the Woolly Loxodon is taking 6 plus 2 from the combat damage, so it's dying. Probably everything on my opponent's board is dying. Probably everything on my side is dying. It's very strange. It's very interesting. It's similar to Deflecting Palm, I would say. And it kind of, with a lot of things in Fate Reforged, really is high variance. At least on this, you are fairly sure what's going to happen. But I think there's so many different situations that you'll find yourself in where this will be terrible or where this will be really good. One thing I really dislike is that this hits you and your opponent for the exact same amount of damage. So, if I'm already taking a lot of damage and I need to play what is arguably a defensive spell, that means my life total is probably hurting, and I'm going to hurt myself a whole lot more right here. So if this doesn't finish my opponent off immediately, then I'm in trouble. If this doesn't wipe their board, then I'm in trouble. In addition, you can just get blown out because this card has a single target, and that is the creature that you're wanting to live. If your opponent, in response to Arcbond, kills that creature, Arcbond just doesn't happen. And your entire plan, maybe you made some suboptimal blocks, maybe you let through lethal damage, something like that, your entire plan just goes away. And you just die. So, yeah, I'm really off on this card. I don't like it. I'm not going to first pick it, and I'm probably never going to pick it. If I see it happen to be, just doing amazing things, this will change, of course. But on first glance, I really dislike this card. I could maybe see it in a hyper aggressive deck where I know my opponent's life total is going to be significantly less than mine, and then I can use this to kind of help finish them off. But yeah, I don't like this card. I'm giving it a D. I'm not looking to ever play this card. I'm putting it right alongside Deflecting Palm. Deflecting Palm is a card that I have played, I think, once, and I really didn't like it. I've been blown out by it, and I will get blown out by this card for sure, but I don't know that it will ever be really the right choice to do. So I'm giving it a D, and I'm prepared for that to be a controversial grade. All right, next up we have Bathe in Dragonfire. Bathe in Dragonfire is a sorcery for 2 and a red at common, and it says, Bathe in Dragonfire deals 4 damage to target creature. End of story. That's all. So this seems pretty darn good. We had Sandblast, which I was a very big fan of, which was 5 damage to target attacking or blocking creature. This is just 4 damage to whatever creature you want. There's no restrictions on this. The slight restriction is that it's a sorcery, so it's not an instant. That's going to keep it out of, being insanely high value. But it's still going to be a really good card. It's a 3-drop. At 2 and a red, and this kills 99% of things that are going to be on the battlefield on turn 3, and turn 4 for that matter. Heck, often for turn 5, this will kill almost everything on the battlefield. This only doesn't hit the really big morphs that on-morph on, turn 6, turn 7, maybe the biggest of bombs. Yeah, I like this card. This seems like a very high-value common. This is going to be one of the red commons that I first pick if my pack is looking pretty weak. Obviously, not being instant, I can't give this an A. I can't put this in the A territory at all, but I can give it a solid B. This is going to be in every red deck I have. Just fantastic. Slight knock against it that it can't hit players. Slight knock against it that it's not, well, a little bit bigger than slight, but a knock against it that it's not instant, but still a fantastic card. So I give it a B for sure. Next up, we have Bloodfire Enforcers. This is a creature human monk for 3 and a red at uncommon for a 5/2. So we have Canyon Lurkers, basically, without the morph. And it has some rules text. It says Bloodfire Enforcers has first strike and trample. That sounds awesome, but as long as an instant card and a sorcery card are in your graveyard. So it's not or, it is and. You have to have an instant sitting in your graveyard, and you have to have a sorcery sitting in your graveyard for this to be a 5/2 first strike trample. 5/2 first strike trample is insane. That is extremely good. It's going to kill almost everything that could block it before it even gets touched, and probably trample through some damage. That's fantastic. However, I don't think you're going to have that all that often. This requires so much setup to make sure that this has first strike and trample. Otherwise, it's just a 5/2 for 4. Now, I've really liked Canyon Lurkers. Canyon Lurkers has done a lot of good work for me, but I think the real value of Canyon Lurkers is the morph. The fact that you can morph Canyon Lurkers down on turn 3, attack in, they probably won't block, they'll overvalue their morph or whatever, and then suddenly you hit them for 5 on turn 4, which is great. There's not going to be any surprises with this guy. You know, there's not going to be any morph turning into a 5-2 surprise. They know it's going to be a 5-2, and they can look at your graveyard and they know if it has trample or first strike or not. And so this goes down a fair bit. I give it a C-. It's a card that I'll readily cut, and it's a card that I'm never really going to value thinking that it has trample and first strike. I'm going to value it as a 5-2. I just don't think that instant and sorcery kind of hoop to jump through is going to happen all that often. All right, next up we have Break Through the Line. Break Through the Line is an enchantment for 1 and a red at uncommon, and it says red. Pay red. Target creature with power 2 or less gains haste until end of turn and can't be blocked this turn. So basically add a red to your casting cost of your creature, and that creature has haste and can't be blocked the turn it comes down, as long as it's power 2 or less. I don't like this. I don't really like this at all. It's an entire card slot in your deck for an enchantment that hits the battlefield and does nothing. It doesn't change the game at all when it comes into play. And it doesn't change the game at all until you play a creature that has power 2 or less, which generally isn't a very impactful creature. Now, that creature that has power 2 or less, you can give it haste and give it unblockable, and that's kind of cool. That's kind of useful, but I don't know that I want to devote an entire card slot to this card. I could see some fun things where this is in like a Mardu tokens deck where, you know, I don't even know, because I think a lot of the token generators that make decent tokens only make a single one, but you could give that token haste and unblockable, I suppose. You know, Ponyback Brigade, if you really wanted to and had 3 extra red, you could make those 3 goblins unblockable, but just in general, it doesn't seem that good to me. I don't terribly want to spend a card slot on this just to get some minimal value, so I do give it a D. I'm not going to take this card, and I can't imagine a world that I'm ever actually going to play this card. It'll sit in my sideboard probably every time I ever have it. Next up, we have Collateral Damage, which is an instant for 1 red at common. It's pretty aggressively costed, so let's see what it does. Well, it says, as an additional cost to cast it, you have to sacrifice a creature. So this doesn't cost 1 red, this costs 1 red and your worst creature on the battlefield. So it's uncastable if you don't have a creature. What does it do? Well, it says Collateral Damage deals 3 damage to target creature or player. Well, that's not bad. This is Lightning Bolt. This is Lightning Bolt with a fairly heavier cost attached to it. You have to sack a creature. You know, maybe, again, in a token deck, you're going to have a lot of tokens and you're not going to care about one. You would prefer that one of your 1/1 goblins is just 3 damage to a creature or to a player. And that seems like a pretty good trade for a 1/1 goblin token. In addition, I talked about this with the Karsi High Priest, was it? Karsi High Priest. This is a sack outlet, so there is active treason in this format. There is Jeering Instigator in this format. You could steal their bomb, attack with their bomb, sack their bomb, and deal 3 damage to them. That's also pretty good. Unfortunately, I don't think there's enough support for that to really be something that you're going to be looking to do all that often. And of course, this is sometimes just going to be a 100% dead card in your hand. You're not going to have a creature, or you're not going to have a creature that is less good than 3 damage to the face or 3 damage to a creature. So this seems completely cuttable to me. If you have active treason, if you have Jeering Instigator, this goes up a little bit and probably would get an include. But in general, I'm not going to be looking to include this. I'm not really going to be looking to play this unless I'm playing active treason, which we'll talk about later, actually, but I very rarely do. I do play Jeering Instigator, though, so I'll be happy if I can Jeering Instigator and Collateral Damage once. But that's not quite Magical Christmas Land, but it is not your everyday draft sort of route. So I'm not going to heavily value this, and I'm going to cut it more times than not, I imagine. So I do give it a C minus. Next up, we have Defiant Ogre. Defiant Ogre is a creature ogre warrior for 5 and a red at common, and this is the red version of the Sandstep Outcast, Hooded Assassin, Aven Surveyor cycle. So this is the one that has 2 choices. So when Defiant Ogre enters the battlefield, choose 1. Put a +1/+1 counter on Defiant Ogre. And sorry, he's a 3/5. So that's the same as all the other ones. So he is a 4/6 for 6. Or he's a 3/5 for 6 that destroys target artifact when he enters the battlefield. Well, we've talked briefly about artifacts when we talked about Renowned Weaponsmith, and there's not many. There is not many in this format that you really need to be concerned about. I think, and we'll talk about artifacts later on when we get to the last video of this week, but I still think the best artifact in the set is just Ghostfire Blade. And I have played against Ghostfire Blade. I have had Naturalize in my sideboard, and I still haven't put Naturalize into my main deck to deal with Ghostfire Blade. So if I'm not putting in, arguably the best and easiest artifact destruction card into my deck to deal with the best artifact in this set, I'm probably not going to be choosing the second mode on this guy ever. So this guy is essentially a vanilla 4/6 for 6, which isn't very good at all. It's bad. I don't really want to be playing 4/6s for 6. There's a heck of a lot else that I prefer to be doing at 6. I would prefer to be, playing something that's about to win me the game on turn 6 or with 6 mana. So I do give this guy just a flat out F. I'm never looking to play this card. If I play this, it means that something's gone pretty seriously wrong, that I don't have any other red creatures to play. There will, of course, be a world where something did go wrong, where you just don't have enough creatures and you need something to go in. This is the... he's not even Rotting Mastodon or War Behemoth territory, I would say, because those cards are slightly better. War Behemoth is a morph, of course. Rotting Mastodon has 8 toughness. It blocks essentially everything before pumps and boosts and spells, whereas this guy does die to some things. So I'm giving this an F. I'm never looking to take it, and I'm never looking to play it. Next up, we have Dragon Rage. Dragon Rage is an instant at 2 and a red at uncommon, and it says add red to your mana pool for each attacking creature you control. Until end of turn, attacking creatures you control gain red, pay red. This creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn. So each of your creatures gets fire breathing, and you get enough mana to give each of your attacking creatures +1/+0. You can, of course, just put all that mana into one creature if you want to. You can, do this after blocks have been assigned so that you know where you want to put all your damage. This is kind of like a weak Trumpet Blast, or a variable Trumpet Blast. You obviously don't get +2/+0 on everything out of this. You get, at best... Although not at best, it's situation dependent, of course, but for every creature, you at best get +1/+0. But you do get that possibility of, they blocked this guy, they blocked that guy, so you're going to pump all this mana and any other red mana you happen to have into the unblocked guy. I still don't like this, even with that situation. It just seems bad to me. It seems very bad. Fire breathing is generally not the best. You generally don't want to pay to give something fire breathing. Being able to do it at instant speed is nice. Putting the actual aura fire breathing on a card makes it clear what that creature may do in combat, whereas at least this, your opponent has not necessarily no idea that they're going to be suddenly dealing with a whole bunch of fire breathing. But that still just isn't enough for me. I would take Trumpet Blast over this any day, I think, in the sort of Trumpet Blast deck, and I don't think I would ever really put this into the what would want to be the Trumpet Blast deck. It's just kind of a pale imitation of it, I think. And so I give it an F as well. That's 2 Fs in a row. I'm never looking to take this card. I'm never looking to play this card. All right, let's see if we can break the bad rating cycle. Next up, we have Fierce Invocation. It's a sorcery for 4 and a red at common, and it says manifest the top card of your library. Then put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. So you get to manifest the top card of your library, and it's a 4/4 instead of a 2/2. So it's a 5 mana, a lot of the time vanilla 4/4. That's not that good. I would rather play 4 for a 4/4. 5 mana 4/4 is slightly under the vanilla test. Now, of course, Manifest has the potential upside of this being something better. It's a Woolly Loxodon, and so you get to flip it up, and your Woolly Loxodon is an 8/9. It's a little bit of overkill, but I'll take it nonetheless. But again, this goes into my whole Manifest hesitancy that it's high variance. I never know if this is going to be a 5 mana 4/4, which I don't terribly care about, or if it's going to be something better. Maybe even something awesome if it happens to be a flyer, or it happens to be a lifelinker, or it happens to be anything special like that. But I feel like in the average deck, there's going to be, I don't know, I would guess 3 cards that you would be super excited to be able to flip over and have 2 +1/+1 counters on, and the rest are going to be either lands, non-creature spells, or creatures where, maybe they're already a 2/2 or something like that. So I do give this a pretty low grade. It's not an F, so we at least break the F streak that we've had going on here. I give it a D. It's, again, something that I'm not really gonna look to play. I don't necessarily want to be playing this. I could see putting it in, and as with a lot of Manifest cards, I'll also say that I'm totally open to this being better than I think, if Manifest is better than I think it is. But if Manifest is right where I think it is, this just isn't something I want to play. Not for 5 mana anyways. If this was 4, I'd consider it. If this was 3, I think it would be broken. But for 5, just not something I'm looking to play. All right, next up we have a rare, so maybe this will get a good rating, yeah? Flame Rush Rider. This is a creature human warrior for 4 and a red at rare for a 3/3. So this is a 5 mana 3/3. So even worse than Fierce Invocation, but this does stuff. This says, whenever Flame Rush Rider attacks, put a token onto the battlefield tapped and attacking that's a copy of another target attacking creature. Exile the token at end of combat. So whenever this guy attacks, you can put a token on the battlefield that's a copy of any other creature that's attacking with it. You can't copy itself. It does say another target creature. So there's no, tokens after tokens after tokens. But anything else that's attacking with this guy can also be copied. And he can dash for 2 and a red, 2 and 2 red, 2 red. So for 4, so for cheaper than he costs. This is one of the cheaper dashes. So this is interesting. I actually do like this guy a fair bit. And it's because I kind of picked up on a really cool synergy, and that synergy is Raid. So if you would trigger Raid, you can actually copy an attacking Raid creature and get the Raid trigger before combat even finishes, before it even arguably starts. And the best case scenario here, of course, would be Mardu Heartpiercer, which is a raid creature that says when it enters the battlefield, if you've attacked this turn, deal 2 damage to target creature or player. So what that means is if you have Mardu Heartpiercer down and you attack with this and that, you can copy Mardu Heartpiercer. It will appear on the battlefield. You have attacked, and that means that you'll be able to do 2 damage to target creature or player. So you get a free ping out of it, plus a 2/3 attacking. That may be best case scenario mentality. Well, that absolutely is best case scenario mentality. You could, of course, do this on some things like Mardu Horde Chief and get a free 1/1 token out of it, or some other things like that. But I do like that ability. I do also like the ability of just having an extra attacker with this guy. He is relatively expensive if you want to have him just down being able to do this every turn at 3/3. But I actually kind of like him as just a combat trick. I like dashing him out for 4. So dash him out, attack with something that you really want another copy of, get that copy, attacking in. If it's big, you're going to get some extra damage. Preferably, you want to be copying enter the battlefield things. You want to be copying something that's going to get you a card or an ability or deal damage or do something cool like that. And if that's possible, I think this guy's pretty good. We're going to talk about how much I want to have enter the battlefield be an archetype, but we'll have to see if it works out or not. But I'll talk more about that tomorrow. For this, I do give it a B. I do see the downsides. You know, I do see this being expensive. I do see it, the fact that you need good stuff to copy, the fact that the token doesn't stick around. The token does exile at the end of the turn, so you don't just get to keep, you know, making infinite woolly loxodons turn after turn after turn. But I do like this guy, so I do give him a B. I expect to first pick him at least once and find out whether or not he's good. If he is, awesome. If he's not, I'll lower the rating in my head for sure, but I'm going to give him a B. Next up, we have Flame Wake Phoenix. This is another rare creature Phoenix for 1 red, and it's a 2/2. Like many Phoenixes, it has flying and haste, and it says Flame Wake Phoenix attacks each turn if able, so it attacks every single turn if it can. It also has Ferocious. This is, I think, one of our first instances of Ferocious in this set so far. At the beginning of combat, on your turn, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, which is Ferocious, of course, you may pay red. If you do, return Flame Wake Phoenix from your graveyard to the battlefield. So like all Phoenixes, it has a way of coming back. If you have Ferocious, so if you have a big guy, and Flame Wake Phoenix is in your graveyard, you can pay a red at the beginning of combat, and it comes back to the battlefield. At which point you go to declare attackers, and you can attack with this. Or sorry, actually you have to attack with this because it attacks each turn if able. So that's a nice cheap cost. You know, Chandra's Phoenix was always nice. It was 1 red for a 2/2. It didn't have to attack every turn. And to return it, you had to deal damage from a red instant or sorcery or planeswalker for it to come back to your hand, not even to the field. Whereas this just comes back to the battlefield for you having to pay the low cost of 1 red, which you have because you cast this originally. In most cases, maybe this somehow got milled or something, and you didn't actually have your red mana yet. But anyways, this seems really good. It seems like 2 damage a turn, almost guaranteed in the early game, barring anything like a Monastery Flock. But yeah, in an aggressive deck, this just seems awesome. With Bolster, this seems awesome. With combat tricks that put counters on it, it seems awesome. It seems like just a solid card. Chandra's Phoenix was always a solid card. This seems like a solid card as well. You know, it's not a bomb territory. It's just a 2/2. You know, something that wins the game after 10 turns of attacking. Not really a bomb, but really good. I give it a B+. I will first pick this hands down and immediately decide to try to jump into heavy red aggro, especially if it's low curve. But I'm really excited by this guy. I think this just fits into Mardu aggro. It fits into red-white aggro. It fits into Teamer aggro, of course, to get that Ferocious thing. You know, the downside would be that this doesn't necessarily fit in the uber aggressive deck. You know, the deck that doesn't have a 4-power creature. Because if you don't have a 4-power creature, this isn't coming back. But, you know, as long as you have a 4-power creature, or even a way to make something a 4-power creature, this just seems solid. So not quite bomb territory, but I'm perfectly happy to have this in probably every red deck ever. Maybe if I happen to draft, you know, the deck that tops out at 3, I wouldn't include it, but that would be pretty rare. All right, next up we have Friendly Fire. Friendly Fire is an instant for 3 and a red at uncommon. It says target creature's controller reveals a card at random from his or her hand. Friendly Fire deals damage to that creature and that player, equal to the revealed card's converted mana cost. So you choose a creature that you want to die. You have no idea how much damage that creature's going to take, but you want some sort of damage to be dealt to it. Then that controller, or that creature's controller, reveals a card at random, so you're probably going to pick a card out of their hand and reveal it. And whatever converted mana cost it has, is dealt to that creature and to that player, so that's a nice little bonus. But again, we're looking at super high variance. We're looking at randomness, and I don't like that. I don't like how much of that there is in this set. It's not a theme of this set. It's not a stated theme like Choice was, but it definitely seems to exist in spades in this set. And good players hold back lands. So if I have 7 lands down, I typically won't play my 8th. I'll just hold it back, pretend it's a combat trick. And so if you're on, turn 7, turn 8, turn 9, and you cast this, there's every chance that they're going to reveal a land, and you're going to deal no damage to that creature and no damage to them, and you just ripped a card up. You did nothing by casting this. And for me, cards that do that, cards that, at least some of the time, you can just rip up and you get the same effect as casting it, I don't like. This is an F. This is a don't take it, don't play it card. I am never, ever, ever wanting to play this card. So just a solid F. Don't play that card. Next up, we have Goblin Heel Cutter. This is Ankle Shanker's cousin, I suppose. This is a creature Goblin Berserker for 3 and a red at common, and it's a 3/2. It says, whenever Goblin Heel Cutter attacks, target creature can't block this turn. So whenever it attacks, you can pick a creature and say, that creature's not blocking. Not only this guy, but it can't block anything. So it also can't block your Woolly Loxodon, which would be pretty nice. You can also dash this guy. You can dash him for 2 and a red. So he's another one of the cheaper dashers. You can pay 1 less to get him out and get that ability going. But yeah, he's is the best I can say. It's expensive for the cost, of course. A 4 mana 3/2 isn't that good. We have 3 mana 3/2s available to us in this set, so 4 mana 3/2 just, not quite there. The fact that he can come down on turn 3 briefly is where he should be. So I kind of like that. And he also, of course, has a pretty big benefit if your opponent only has a creature or 2, so that you can choose, their worst creature to be their only blocker. But I feel like that's not super consistent. I don't feel like you're going to be in that dream situation every time, especially as we've seen, board stalls are kind of the natural environment of Khans of Tarkir. Archer's Parapets and Monastery Flocks and Dragon's Eye Savants are kind of the name of the game in Khans, and so you typically have a whole bunch of creatures on the other side of the board, which won't necessarily let this guy get through all that well. So this guy seems perfectly cuttable to me. So I give him a C for perfectly cuttable. He'll go in when I need a red creature, maybe in a heavily aggressive deck, or maybe in the sideboard even when I see that I'm not against a board stall grindy deck. He might come in, but I'm never going to be terribly excited to play this guy. He's just going to kind of be filler for me. So I do give him a C. I'll cut him whenever there's anything better, and I'll keep him in whenever there's not anything better. So solid middle of the road C. Next up, we have Gore Swine. Gore Swine is a 4/1 for 2 and a red for a creature boar at common, and that's all. No other rules text. It's a purely vanilla flavor text filled card. So this is a 4/1 for 3. 4/1 for 3 is whatever, a 3/1 for 2 is pretty cool a lot of the times. A 4/1 for 3, we're starting to get into territory where I'd prefer a lot of other things. I'd prefer a Morph on turn 3. I'd prefer a 3/2 on turn 3. I'd prefer a lot more than a 4/1. So this guy just doesn't seem all that good. He's basically Frostwalker, a turn later and slightly harder to kill, but still pretty easy to throw 1 single damage at this guy. And, there's going to be a lot of blockers, as we've seen with Morph. With Manifest now, there's going to be a lot of blockers. Even a lot of people's non-creature cards are going to be making creatures. So I think this guy is going to die to pretty much anything. Maybe you get to live the dream and very rapidly bolster this guy, because he will be, one of your lowest power, lowest toughness creatures on the board. So if he can quickly become a 5/2 or a 6/3, then this guy grows pretty big. But that's starting to get into multi-card territory, which you can't really count on. So I give this guy a C minus. He's going to be cut a lot of the time, and he's going to be kind of the last red card in the pack for me most of the time. So C minus. It's barely playable, and there's going to be a lot of other things you're going to hope to have instead of this. It's not terrible. It's not the worst thing that could happen to you, but it's nowhere near the best. All right, next up we have Humble Defector. Humble Defector is a creature human rogue for 1 and a red at uncommon for a 2/1. So 2/1 for 2, we've seen those regularly. We prefer 3/1s for 2, but 2/1s for 2 are still kind of okay. And this has some rules text. It says tap, draw 2 cards. That's pretty awesome. But target opponent gains control of Humble Defector. So you get 2 cards, and then your opponent gets this guy. For good. Forever. Until they use the ability. Activate this ability only during your turn. So you can't even do this. End of their turn, get 2 cards, they get this guy, and he's tapped, so he's not going to be usable by them for a full turn cycle. You don't get to do any of that. Your opponent is very quickly going to have control of this guy untapped. So card draw is pretty awesome. Drawing 2 cards, especially in red, is, nearly unheard of. But this guy just doesn't seem that great because of the fact that you have to then immediately give control of this card advantage engine to your opponent, who can then get that card advantage right back. And then it's no longer advantage. It's card neutrality at that point. So I'm not really excited about this guy. There's some fancy things you could do with this. You could tap him, draw the cards. In response to the trigger, you could... what was the Peel from Reality card yesterday? 2 days ago. Rite of Undoing. You could Rite of Undoing him, and then that way you get the cards, but you don't have to trade him. You could sacrifice him some way, maybe with the Karsti High Priest or something like that. So there are some fun things that you could do with that. But as we just talked about, once we're starting to talk about multiple cards that are needed to get something cool done, it's not something you can even remotely reliably consider happening in Constructed. Of course, you can expect that in Constructed. In Limited, you can't expect that. So I give this guy a C minus. He's, again, perfectly cuttable. His ability is so close to being what Red has always dreamed of, but there's always that downside in Red. There's always that cost you have to pay, and it's a pretty big one here. So yeah, if he turns out to be easily abusable, then this guy goes off the charts, but I just don't think that's going to happen. It's going to require some pretty specific cards and some pretty specific situations to have it happen. So I give him a C minus. He's just kind of could have been better, but that's Red for you. All right, next up we have another cycle card. This is the uncommon creature that cares about the other 2 colors. So this is Hungering Yeti, which is a creature, Yeti of course, for 4 and a red at uncommon for a 4/4. So it's a 5-mana 4/4. We just recently talked about that. 5-mana 4/4, not the best. I'd rather have a 4-mana 4/4. He has some rules text. As long as you control a green or blue permanent, you may cast Hungering Yeti as though it had flash. So that's why it costs 5. It costs that 1 extra because you could flash this in if you have a green permanent or a blue permanent. So if you're playing Jeskai or if you're playing Temur, you can flash this guy in. Flash 4/4 is a little bit better. Being able to surprise somebody with something that kills a mild number of things in this set. It at least trades with a lot of things in this set, and it kills a lot of early game. Of course, 5-drops aren't necessarily considered early game, which knocks this guy down a fair bit. The fact that you have to have one of those other colored permanents down, or else this guy doesn't do anything special, hurts this quite a bit in my case. And so it knocks it down to a C minus for me. So that's the 3rd C minus in a row. Completely and utterly cuttable. I'm not going to look to auto include this in anything. It's going to be one of those cards that kind of starts in my sideboard, and when I get to deck construction, I look at it and I think about it, but it probably doesn't make it in. Maybe if I need a playable, maybe if I'm missing out on some creatures, he might sneak his way in, but in general, he's just not going to make it. The flash just isn't that special for me. I prefer something flashy with my flash. I prefer a death touch or a first striker, something with an enter the battlefield effect, something that does something when you flash it in. A plain vanilla 4/4 that's slightly overcosted with flash, not really that big of a deal for me. Next up we have Lightning Shrieker. Lightning Shrieker is, I believe, the only common dragon in this set. So it's creature dragon at common for 4 and a red for a 5/5. So he's cheaper than the uncommon dragons. He's bigger than the uncommon dragons. He has flying. He's a dragon, of course. He has trample. He has haste. He sounds amazing, but at the beginning of the end step, doesn't matter if it's your end step, your opponent's end step, 7 end steps from now, if you somehow been skipping every end step, at the beginning of the end step, Lightning Shrieker's owner shuffles it into his or her library. So in this format, and in most formats, he's down for half a turn, 3/4 of a turn at best. And then he goes not to your hand, not to the top of your library, he goes randomly somewhere inside of your library. You may never see him again. This is a bad card. This is Lava Axe, but worse, I would say. So Lava Axe, of course, is 4 and a red, deal 5 damage to target opponent. Or target player, I think. And it's a sorcery. It's generally the sort of textbook card that people talk about because new players love it. New players love the idea of dealing, a quarter of their entire opponent's life damage to them with one card. But the issue is, if that doesn't kill your opponent, it didn't really do much. You're not going to Lava Axe them the next turn as well, and the turn after. Maybe you drafted a lot of Lava Axes, drew them all, and, have creatures on the battlefield, but that's not going to happen almost ever. And so it doesn't really do anything. And this guy's the same, except if they have a flyer, if they have removal, if they have anything, they don't even take the 5 damage. If they have a blocker, they lose the blocker and they maybe take a couple damage. So it becomes a lightning bolt. It becomes a shock. And then it goes back into your deck, potentially, arguably likely, never to be seen again. So even though you could have that dream of, it always ending up back on top of your library, so you do get to go Lava Axe Dragon, Lava Axe Dragon, Lava Axe Dragon 3 turns in a row. That's not going to happen statistically. And so this is basically Lava Axe. You may as well consider that this card has gone to your graveyard and you're not going to get to play it again. And so it just seems terrible. I give this a straight up F. This is not a card that I ever want to pick. This is not a card that I ever want to include. It's despite the card type, despite it saying creature dragon, it's really just a crappy sorcery. It's not much better than this. I'm never really looking to play this. I'm never looking to take it. It's just bad as far as I'm concerned. So next up we have Mardu Rune Mark. This is the Mardu version of the Rune Mark. Enchantment Aura, 2 in a red, at common, enchant creature. Enchanted creature has +2/+2. That's the same as all the other Rune Marks we've already talked about. Its ability says enchanted creature has first strike as long as you control a white or black permanent. So we have had Vigilance, we have had Death Touch, we have had Flying. Flying's been the best, I would say. Vigilance, not that good. Death Touch, very confusing to be on a +2/+2 aura because it's a defensive ability. First Strike makes perfect sense to be on a +2/+2 aura. A 3/2 First Strike is awesome early game, but by the time we get to turn 5, turn 6, there's going to be creatures on your opponent's board that don't even care that guy has First Strike. But if you give that 3/2, let's say he's a vanilla now, we give that 3/2 +2/+2, and he becomes a 5/4 First Strike, well, that gives him whole new life. That lets him deal with those 5 drops, those 6 drops. So I do like the First Strike more than I like the Vigilance, more than I like the Death Touch. Not quite as much as I like the flying, but I do like this rune mark. Again, it has all the usual enchantment issues. If your creature is destroyed, if your creature is bounced, if your creature for some reason at all leaves the battlefield briefly, this enchantment is just gone. It's just destroyed. There's enchantment hate, but again, nobody ever main decks the enchantment hate, so you don't have to worry about that. But you have to worry about the removal. You have to worry about the force aways. You have to worry about the whisk aways. You have to worry about all of those various bounce spells, which will just ruin your day with this enchantment. And so that immediately makes me hesitant about including this in my deck. That being said, I do like the first strike. I don't like it as much as flying, but I do like it more than the other ones. So this is a card that I'm looking to not always cut, and I may not even immediately cut it, but I will still regularly cut it. I will still take a creature over this card the vast majority of the time. So I do give it a C-. That might actually be the highest rating of my rune marks. Doing a quick check. Well, no, of course, the Jeskai rune mark is a C- as well. And again, I've talked about minuses, so I guess I would give this a minus because I do like the flying ever so slightly more than I like the first strike. But I'd say they're pretty on par, which means they're both very, very cuttable. Again, this is my usual enchantment disclaimer. Now, there is less removal in this set than there has been historically, which arguably makes enchantment a little bit better, but there's also a lot of bounce, so I don't really think that that's a terribly good argument, because bounce is just as good as removal as far as auras are concerned. All right, next up we have Mardu Scout. Mardu Scout is a creature goblin scout at common for red. So 2 red. He's a 3/1. So he's a 3/1 for 2. We like that. We've talked about that. Now he does cost red, which is a bit of a problem. You have to have 2 mountains or 2 red mana sources available for this to be a 2-drop. But if you don't have 2 red sources available, you have a red and a colorless, you can dash this guy. You can dash this guy for 1 and a red. That's strange. You know, this guy costs the exact same for, you know, converted mana cost, but the actual casting cost is, of course, a little bit more difficult because it is 2 red. The dash cards are kind of cool when they're the same cost. Typically, that means that there's some ability on them, or in this case, it just means it's a little bit easier. So as I've talked about with 3/1s for 2, I think they're perfectly playable. I think they have a strong place in an aggressive deck. And I think the fact that this guy, even if you stumble on your red mana, can still come down is kind of cool. You know, he's going to kind of be in Valley Dasher territory in that I'm not remotely excited about playing him, and there's a ton of other things I would rather play instead of him, but that if I have him, and if I don't have anything amazing to replace him with, I'll totally put 1 in. I don't think I would put 2 in, but I would totally put 1 in. Yeah, I give him a C+. I think he's cuttable, but I think he's playable more often than not. I don't think the 2 red is that big of an issue because of the dash cost. You're not holding this guy back to block, probably. You're not probably being the defensive deck if you're playing this guy. You're looking to get him down and attack with him. If that means he comes back to your hand at the end of the turn, probably not that big of a deal for you. Eventually you can get him down when you hit your second red source. So yeah, C+, not amazing, not exciting, but totally playable. Next up, we have a rare. We have Mob Rule. This is a sorcery for 4 red. So this is a 6-drop, so it must be something pretty big. It says choose 1. You can gain control of all creatures with power 4 or greater until end of turn. On tap those creatures, they gain haste until end of turn. So you can active treason everything on the board that has power 4 or greater. If you don't want to do that, you can gain control of all creatures with power 3 or less until end of turn. On tap those creatures, they gain haste until end of turn. So you can gain control of everything on the board that is 3 or less power. So you basically get to take control of everything that's either big or everything that's small. That sounds good, but I don't necessarily know if it is good. Um, my issue here is that I'm not certain how often your opponent only has 4 or greater, or only has 3 or less. This is one of those cards where if I cast it, I want to win the game right there. I don't want to take 3 of their 4/4s, leave them with 3 2/2s, attack in with their 4/4s, kill their 2/2s, and then just be sitting there with a whole heck of game left to play, and him still having 12 power on the board and 12 toughness. That doesn't seem all that good. I want to win the game when I cast this, and I just don't know how often I can. I think this has massive blowout potential. If my opponent does only have 4 or greater or 3 or less, being able to take their entire board and attack them with their entire board and my entire board should probably end the game in most situations. But I don't know how often that comes up. If that comes up more often than I think, this card's better than I think. If that situation comes up about where I think it does, then I think this card sits right where I put my grade, and my grade's a C- on this. It's something that I'm pretty hesitant about. I don't really want to play this. I don't really want to play a 6-drop in red. That's the first knock against it. And I don't want to play this card unless it finishes the game right then and there. If it can finish the game, C+, B-, maybe even a B. But if it can't reliably finish the game, I'm going to stick it right where I have it right now at a C-. So I'm nervous about this. I'm going to have to see it played. I don't want to be the one to first pick this and give it a try, just because I'm so hesitant about it. I'll wait to see other people play it. That being said, like Deflecting Palm, like Arc Bond, I am positive that somewhere, someday, some game, by some person, I will get demolished by this. But I don't think it'll happen all that often. Next up, we have Outpost Siege. This is the red siege from the Siege cycle. We've seen Palace, Monastery, Citadel so far. This is the Outpost Siege. Interestingly, they're all named after the Triland. So this is the Mardu Outpost Siege. This is an enchantment for 3 and a red at rare. And it says, as the other ones do, as Outpost Siege enters the battlefield, choose cons or dragons. Cons. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library. Until end of turn, you may play that card. That means if it's a land, you can play it. If it said cast, you wouldn't be able to, but because it says play, you can play a land if that's the land. If you choose dragons, it says whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield. So whenever it dies, whenever it's exiled, whenever it flickers, whenever it gets bounced, whenever it goes anywhere other than the battlefield, Outpost Siege deals 1 damage to target creature or player. This siege seems fairly decent. I think I like the Khan's ability a lot more than I like the Dragon's ability. Chandra's ability, her +0, Chandra Pyromaster, was this. This is kind of the new red card advantage that they're working on. They've always wanted sort of random card advantage for red, and this is what they've sort of been really harping on. A lot of things actually allow you to do this these days, where you get a card, sort of. There are going to be times where you get a card you can't play, and unfortunately you lose it, but there are going to be a lot of times where you get a card that you can play, and you're going to be pretty happy with that. And that's a powerful ability. You know, not having to have Chandra down, not having to have a Planeswalker, to have this ability happen every turn seems pretty cool to me. In red, this means that you're going to be hitting that mana you need. This means you're going to be hitting those aggressive creatures that you want to get onto the battlefield a turn early. It just seems pretty solid. It kind of has that same disclaimer as Monastery Siege that I was talking about, where this does half your deck. So your deck goes from having about 30 turns worth of card draw to having 15 turns worth of card draw. But even more so in red than in blue, you're going to be done the game before this mills you out. So I don't think that's going to be too much of a concern. With the blue one, I think it's going to be slightly more of a concern, but even then, you should be able to win the game long before that happens. The Dragon's ability, I just don't like. I just don't like the incidental pinging. There are a lot of 1 toughness creatures, but I don't know that I want to waste this entire card on getting 1 damage probably pretty randomly. Interestingly, it does work with dash. So, if I had Mardu Scout out, I could dash Mardu Scout, attack with him or not attack with him, depending on the situation, and then return him to my hand and he deals a damage, or Outpost Siege deals the damage, rather. So that's kind of cool. There's a little bit of synergy there with dash. But just in general, I think the 1 damage is just going to be way too inconsistent. A lot of the times this Outpost Siege is just going to be on the battlefield, not really doing anything for you if you do choose Dragon. So I think I'll take this relatively highly, but I'm going to be using cons 99% of the time, I would say. So I do give this a B-. The card advantage is quite good, especially in red, but the second half of this card is just, I think, not that good at all. So B-, probably first pickable, but there's a very good chance of there being better on commons that you'll want in any given pack, but relatively highly pickable, I would say. Next up, we have Pyrotechnics. This is a reprint. This has been reprinted several times. As I looked it up, it was reprinted it was I think originally printed in 4th edition. It was in 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th edition, and a few expansions as well. It's a sorcery for 4 and a red at uncommon, and it says Pyrotechnics deals 4 damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures and/or players. So for 5 mana, it's a 4 damage burn spell, or it's a 3-1, a 2-2, a 1-1-1-1, whatever you want. And it can kill a player and hit your opponent. Kill a player. It can kill a creature and hit your opponent. It can kill multiple creatures. It can finish off creatures. It can do a whole bunch of stuff. It gets a slight knock because it's not an instant. It's a sorcery. But I feel like if this was an instant, it would probably cost something ridiculous like 6 mana, which would be way too much. But this just seems, perfectly fine. It kills a lot of creatures. It kills Butcher of the Horde. It kills a lot of the big flying creatures that you might be concerned about. The only thing that it kind of misses on are the giants like Woolly Loxodon and other things like that. But yeah, I think this is right up there with Bathe in Dragonfire, which also does 4 damage, but for a little bit cheaper. The fact that you can just finish your opponent with this is nice. Aerostorm has been huge for that. Just being able to suddenly do 4 or 5 damage to your opponent has ended a number of games that I've been involved in. So yeah, this seems like a high pick to me. This seems like the card that you would take over Outpost Siege. This is the card that you would take over a lot of weak to middling power rares. I'm pretty happy with this. I give it a B+. I think it's just solid burn removal. Next up, we have Rage Form. This is the form cycle. So this is an enchantment for 2 red at uncommon. And like the other forms, it says when Rage Form enters the battlefield, it becomes an aura with enchant creature. Manifest the top card of your library and attach Rage Form to it. That's the same as Light Form and Cloud Form and whatever the black one is that I can't remember right now. This says enchanted creature has Double Strike. So Double Strike is pretty decent. And actually, I don't think there was a black form. Maybe that's why I can't remember the name of it. So yeah, Double Strike is decent. So the other forms that we've seen, no, there was definitely not a black one. So the other forms we've seen have been Flying and Hexproof and Flying and Lifelink. Flying and Lifelink was quite good. Flying and Hexproof was about as good, although probably slightly less. This doesn't get flying. So unlike the other two, this guy is going to be on the ground. And at worst, it's going to be a 2/2 double striker, which means that it's virtually a 4-power creature, which is okay. The fact that it's 2 power means that it gets killed by an awful lot of burn spells. Later in the game, this is a 4-drop at least. It's a 4-drop, which means you're going to be playing it on turn 4 at least. It may be later, which means that it's going to be killed by a pretty big number of things. It's even killed by a 2/3, so it's killed by things that are played on turn 2 and turn 3. If you flip it over, there's going to be some insanity happening. A Willy Loxodon is probably the best case scenario I always bounce back to. A 6/7 double striker is insane. But I don't know how often that's going to be. You don't play a deck that has 6 Woolly Loxodons. You play a deck that has 1, maybe 2. How often would you have a card that's too much better than a 2/2 with this? I'm not sure about giving the manifest creature double strike. And this again goes back to my whole cautious attitude towards manifest and the randomness of it. I just don't know how often this is going to be all that good. I don't know how often it's going to be, super amazing and you're going to get an awesome, unmanifestable creature with double strike suddenly. If manifest is, this is the caveat I've been saying all week, if manifest is better than I think, this card goes up in value. If manifest is not as good as I think, this card goes down in value. So I have it as C+. I still think it's okay. I've been slowly talking myself into manifest being okay, and a manifest double striker is a little bit better than okay, but I don't think it's anywhere near as good as light form and cloud form. I don't think it's anywhere near as good as having flying, and I don't think it's anywhere near as good as having hexproof, let alone lifelink. So I give this a C+. It's something that I'm gonna have to play with as I'm gonna have to play with a lot of the manifest cards, but I just think it's solidly lower than cloud form and light form. So C+. Next up, we have our red mythic, our only red mythic. This is a Shaman of the Great Hunt, and it's a creature orc shaman for 3 and a red. And he's a 4/2, so he's a 4/2 for 4, which is okay. 2 toughness is a little bit low, but he is 4, so he's ferocious right away, so that's decent. He has haste, which is pretty good if this guy comes down on turn 4. Unfortunately, there's probably going to be a morph on the other side of the table, so he would die right away, but he has other text. He says, whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So if this guy does get through on turn 4, he's a 5/3 immediately. If any other creatures come with him, they immediately get bounced up a level. They immediately get +1/+1. That seems pretty good. He also says ferocious, which if this guy is on the battlefield, you have 2 Simic. So green or blue, green or blue. Draw a card for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. So at the very least, this guy, as soon as he comes down, you can draw a card. And if you have more 4 power creatures, you can draw more than 1 card. And might I remind you, this is in red, although it's in red-green or red-blue or red-green-blue. But this is card draw. And card draw is huge in red. I can see this in a deck where you're playing red-green and splashing blue, and you get all of the card draw advantage that blue normally has, despite only splashing for blue, which would be pretty good. So I like this guy. I like this guy quite a lot. I like this guy for his stats, kind of. They're okay. I love this guy for the fact that he makes everything on your board a Stromkirk Noble. Everything on your board that gets damage through to a player gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. It's going to make any flyers that you have insane. Your 2/3 Alabaster Kirin is going to become a 3/4 and then a 4/5 and then a 5/6 and just go crazy. Your Mystic of the Hidden Ways are going to be insane with this guy out. This guy doesn't even need to attack. If your opponent has blockers that could kill him, he can just sit back. He doesn't have to be attacking for those counters to go on, and that's huge. I love this guy. I think he is an A. I don't quite put him into the A+ territory of Torrent Elemental or Brutal Horde Chief, but he is a solid A. He is first pickable. I am taking him, and I am never looking back. Next up, we have Shockmaw Dragon. This is the uncommon red dragon, so he is a flying 4/4 creature dragon at uncommon for 4 red, just like all the other ones. And he has an ability just like all the other ones. His ability says, whenever Shockmaw Dragon deals combat damage to a player, it deals 1 damage to each creature that player controls. That seems pretty weak. That seems fairly weak to me. I have talked about how there does seem to be a pretty good number of 1 toughness creatures in this set, but I would prefer to deal with 1 toughness creatures when I want to, and not whenever my opponent lets a 4/4 get through in the air. Because if my opponent's letting a 4/4 get through in the air, I'm presumably just winning already. And so the fact that I get rid of some X1s doesn't seem all that much better. This has the same hesitancy that I have with all of these dragons. I feel like they're all a little bit too expensive for a 4/4 flyer, especially with the double color. 4/4 flyers are good, but at 6 mana with 2 of them being colors, I don't necessarily know if I terribly like them. I want them to have insane abilities, like the rare dragons that we're going to see on Friday. Well, some of the rare dragons that we're going to see on Friday. But this is not an insane ability. This ability just seems, kind of weak to me. The other thing is that if you're attacking with other creatures, maybe this kind of gives all of your creatures +1/+0, assuming that this dragon is going to get through, because that means that your creatures would deal damage to their blockers, and then their blockers would, take an extra damage off the shock mod dragon. But that's obviously something your opponent's going to be very clear is going to happen, and so probably won't get that much of a boost out of it. So yeah, I find this guy to be probably the worst of the dragons, I think, or at least on par with the mill dragon, which is also pretty bad. So I give him a C-. So far, I still think the black dragon's the best that we've looked at, and even that I haven't been terribly high on. So yeah, C-. I'm looking to take him late if he's still around, and I'm looking to cut him, especially in my red decks. My red decks don't cast 6-drops. So yeah, let's move on. Next up is Smoldering Efreet. This is a creature Efreet Monk at common for 1 and a red, and he's a 2/2. So he's a 2/2 for 2, and we all know 2/2s for 2 are fine. 2/2s for 2 are fine on turn 2. They're okay on turn 3. They start to get worse going on up. For some reason, this guy has a downside. We're used to getting 2/2s for 2 for free. Suddenly, this guy is a 2/2 for 2 with a downside. When he dies, you take 2 damage. That seems ridiculous to me. I have no idea why that ability exists. I have no idea why that downside exists on this guy. There's no monk tribal. There's no Efreet tribal. There's no benefit that I'm going to get out of this guy other than him being a 2/2. I don't know why I have to take 2 damage when he inevitably dies. I have no interest in this card. I give it a solid F. I'll play any other creature instead of this guy. I'm super confused why he has a downside for the power and toughness and casting cost that he has. So F, I'm not taking this card. I'm not playing this card. I don't want it. It's a dead card for me. Next up, we have Temur Battle Rage. Temur Battle Rage is an instant for 1 and a red at common, and it says target creature gains double strike until end of turn. So you pick a creature, and it's got double strike. It says a little bit more, though. It has Ferocious. That creature also gets Trample until end of turn if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. So if you cast this on a Ferocious creature, it gets double strike and Trample. That seems okay, but I don't really like... I don't like the double strike combat trick. Flying Crane Technique is good, but that's because it's a combat trick that hits all of your creatures and gives them flying. One single instance of double strike for 1 turn I've never found to be all that good. Double strike is good if it's a natural ability on a creature. Double strike is good if it's given to all of your creatures. Double strike is good if it's repeatable. Double strike I've just never been a big fan of as a one-shot, especially wasting an entire card on it. And the fact that you must have Ferocious for this to get Trample just makes it even that much worse. I give this a D+. I'm not gonna give it an F. I'm not gonna say that I'm never, ever, ever, ever gonna play it. I'm not gonna say that you never, ever, ever should play it, but I don't think it's gonna be in my deck all that often. There are a ton of other instances I would prefer. I would prefer Burn. I would prefer Shocks. I would prefer what was the card? Where'd it go? Pyrotechnics is not an instant, but I'd prefer that. I'd prefer Awaken the Bear. I'd prefer Pump Spells. I'd prefer almost anything over Surprise Double Strike for a turn. Just doesn't seem that good to me. D+. All right, next up we have Vault Breaker. Vault Breaker is a creature orc rogue for 3 and a red at uncommon for a 4/2. So we have another 4-mana 4/2, which we had with Shaman of the Great Hunt. This guy's unfortunately not quite Shaman of the Great Hunt. This guy says whenever Vault Breaker attacks, doesn't have to do damage, whenever he attacks, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. So you get to loot. Or sorry, not loot. You get to rummage is the term used for red looting. You can dash him, though. You can dash him for 2 and a red. So you can get this guy out on turn 3. A 4/2 on turn 3 sounds pretty decent. It even deals with morphs, so you could dash this guy, attack in, you get to rummage right then and there, and you don't have to rummage. It says may, but you do get to rummage if you want to, and maybe kill off their morph. And then if you don't, you get in for 4, and you can just recast him next turn. That seems okay to me. It doesn't seem awesome. You know, this is a 4/2. If you don't have Shaman of the Great Hunt, if you're not bolstering, if you're not doing something, he's going to die to almost every creature that's going to be on your opponent's board before long. But, you know, the rummaging is fine. The dash is kind of cool. It gets him down a little bit early. I'm fairly okay with this guy. I give him a C+. I'll play him, I think, most of the time. I'll cut him if need be, but I think he's going to be kind of by default in my decks. And I'm really excited to see how that rummaging goes. I'm a fan of rummaging. I'm obviously a bigger fan of looting, but rummaging is perfectly fine. Red always is looking for card advantage, and we've actually talked about a few different card advantage spells in red in this set review. So I'm pretty okay with this guy. He seems interesting, and yeah, I want to see how he does. I give him a solid C+. All right, last card of red, and it's a pretty good one. It is Wild Slash. Wild Slash is 1 red for an instant at uncommon, and we're going to skip the first paragraph. It says Wild Slash deals 2 damage to target creature or player. It is Shock. Shock is always good. Shock in a Morph and Manifest set seems incredible. You know, in your time playing cons, you have seen innumerable 2/2s. Being able to tap a single mountain and kill whichever one of those you want is awesome. This does have some extra text, and it may as well not, in limited anyways. Ferocious. If you control a creature with power 4 or greater, damage can't be prevented this turn. That's not that exciting. You know, there's not that much damage prevention spells that are going to be used against this. One quick note, if you were to use, say, Feat of Resistance, which would give your creature presumably protection red. Protection does actually, in the comprehensive rules, prevent damage. It doesn't stop damage, it prevents it. And so this would get around Feat of Resistance. This does get around protection. But again, that's not going to come up all that often. The ferocious text may as well just not be there. This is just Shock, and Shock is fantastic. You know, Shock in a morph set is going to kill so many things so frequently. I love this card. I give it a B+. It's going to be in my red deck every single time. If I get multiples of this, I'm going to be excited. I'm never going to cut this card. I'm super happy with it. B+. First pickable over a lot of rares. There are a number of rares where I'll see this Wild Slash, and I won't even care that there was a rare in this pack. This Wild Slash is what I'm going to take. So yeah, we ended it on a high note. B+ on that. So yeah, that's red. Red's interesting. It looks a little less good, I think it was, than it was in cons. There were a lot of Fs. There were a lot of Ds and low Cs and definitely cuttable cards. That being said, the good cards seem good. Wild Slash, Pyrotechnics, Bathe in Dragonfire, some of the rares like Alicia Who Smiles at Death and Shaman of the Great Hunt seem quite good. I feel like red's going to take kind of a back seat a little bit. So in Mardu, I typically was black-red with a little bit of white a lot of the times. I think if I'm going Mardu now, I'm going to be probably black-white with a little bit of red. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with red. The cards seem to really run the gambit of bad to good, but I'll be excited to see how it goes. Anyways, that's going to wrap it up for the red set review. We have one more full color to go tomorrow. We're going to review green. Then on Friday, we'll review multicolored artifact, colorless land, and have some closing statements and things like that. It'll be a little bit of a shorter video because there's going to be probably 10 to 15 cards less that we'll talk about. But anyways, if you enjoyed the set review, let me know in the comments below. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, etc., let me know. You can find me on Twitter as well at the Mana Leek. That's Leek, like the vegetable, not the card. You can also find me on Facebook at facebook.com/themanaleek. You've already found me here on YouTube. If you like the videos, you can click that little like button, the little thumbs up button to like it. You can and should also subscribe to my channel. That will keep you up to date on the latest videos. That'll let you know as soon as the green video goes up, as soon as the artifact video goes up. It'll let you know as soon as we're back to Wacky Wednesday and Spiky Saturday and any other videos in between. As always, if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, I will see you all tomorrow for the green review.